In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Our Lady, seat of wisdom.
Pray for us.
In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. I don't know who did this, but it's like kind of touched my heart, so I want to leave that up here. So, okay, you're going to cut this out. I got in a 4-hour distraction today. And it was on the book of Job. And I have something planned. I'm going to throw it out right now because if I tell you that I want to do this, that kind of forces me to actually do it. I went through and I pulled out all the references of light and darkness in the entire book of Job. And I started to try to re-dramatize the story as if they're speaking during different phases of the day. As the sun rising, as a preliminary. Chapter 2 ends with 7 days and 7 nights. And so I take the beginning of chapter 3 as in that 7th night. And Job talks through the night. And maybe the dawn is cracking when he goes, let it not see the eyelids of the dawn. But then the dawn is coming. And he's like, the light's coming anyway. But then I track it through the entire book. And so what I want to do is I'm going to abridge the story of Job down to those parts, give a little verse just for context. And I want to actually act it out with someone turning off the lights of the room. So you can see dialogue at night. And maybe I'm going to use my projector to put like a starry sky or a sunrise or a high noon and a sunset. Okay? I think I can do it. I got 2 days done. As far as I read it, it's 3 days of conversations, a third of which is in one last final night. And I think Yahweh, and in the conclusion, when Yahweh shows up, he actually comes at the dawn of the third day. It's kind of like, I'm kind of excited about it. It could just be my imagination running wild, and that could be definitely the case. But just so you know, I'm going to ask some people to do the parts with me, because I'm not doing all 4 characters. Okay? So, Ben, I'm going to ask you, just so you know. Because I need people who can talk with force and loud and who aren't bashful. Okay? So be prepared. Okay. So I plan on having that ready for next time. It might be the week after, but we'll see. Because I would like to do that before we get to the Yahweh monologues. And then also, the other thing I got sidetracked on was reading Canaanite mythology, like actual source texts. And because I want to present, because the book of Job, it's the only book in the Bible that seems to really, really kind of use some pretty interesting language that seems to be borrowing from Canaanite mythology, which would kind of make sense since the protagonist of the story is Job, who's not an Israelite, and he exists in this far-off land, Ur. So it's kind of like a cosmopolitan book. It's not like necessarily within the chosen people. He's portrayed as like an outsider, so maybe he uses this language. Maybe it betrays who his neighbors are. Okay? But anyway, I didn't want to read my presentation of Leviathan and God fighting the sea serpent as the Wikipedia article, which you can read, and it's pretty good. It lays out all the stuff. But I actually wanted to show you source texts that we now have that were found and translated in we didn't develop translating Akkadian cuneiform until 1852, I think. And some of these clay tablets were found in 1930. Okay? And so this stuff sheds new light on a lot of our understanding of some of the ancient texts of the Bible. And so I wanted to present you to what's out there, even though I do not think the book of Job is intending those stories to be real. I think it's using imagery that exists in the popular culture and using it for its own purposes. But I wanted to present you with some sort of knowledge, because it's stuff that like the church fathers have no idea that stuff exists. I mean, they didn't even know Akkadian cuneiform was a language. And nobody ever cites any knowledge of any kind of intimacy with even what hieroglyphics mean and the stories of Egyptian religion or what Canaanite and Babylonian religion entailed. It's not on anybody's radar, but the Israelites lived amongst these people. So it makes sense that we can understand their culture by looking at their neighbors and who they constantly were interacting with. I mean, they did live in Egypt for a very long time, and they lived in Babylon for a very long time too. Okay, so I want to present that information to you, so hopefully I will do those two things. I want to go back to something very mysterious that I found. I know we're on Job's final salvo, but I want to go back to chapter 13, because somebody quoted this to me, and I remembered. It's a very famous line. There's a famous line in the book of Job, and it goes like, "Though he strike me, yet I will trust in him." Or, I will trust in him. Has anybody ever heard that line? Like, it's a famous like Jobian line, like, "Though God strike me, I will trust in him." Has anybody ever heard that? Yes, somebody has. Yeah, that's right, you have. Anyway, it's a very famous line in the book of Job. And when it was presented to me, I was like, where's that at? Because I've read this multiple times for this course, and it didn't strike me where it was at. And so then I had to dig it in. So I got into my Dewey Reams to find out where it is. And it's actually verse 15, okay, of chapter 3. Now, our edition reads this, okay? "Behold, he will slay me. I have no hope." Now, since our last lecture, I talked a lot about different translations and variances that we have, which sometimes are very different. This is a good example of a very different translation, except the reason why this is different is in an unexpected way, one that I wasn't really aware of. It wasn't on my radar, at least. So this verse 15 is translated as, "Though he will strike me, yet I will trust in him." That's translated that way in the King James Version of the Bible. Jerome's Vulgate uses that, and that's why it's in the Dewey Reams. Now, the interesting thing is I dug up my Hebrew Bible, and I looked to see what was there. And I didn't realize this, but I've talked about this before. Like the Hebrew Bible has no vowels, okay? And so you have what's called the received consonantal text, okay, which is just consonants. The problem is all of we wouldn't understand how to read it unless we have the vowels, but all that comes from the 9th, 10th century AD, called the Masoretes. They went in and they put pointings on it in order so that you would know how to vocalize words, okay? Now, sometimes people think, okay, they accidentally put a dot, or maybe this dot's supposed to be 2 dots, and it just got fudged, you know, so it's not an I, it's an E, which could change the nature of the word, just like an O and an A can drastically change the word RT, right? It can mean rat or it can mean rod. Like, those are 2 different things. So what's the vowel? Vowel's important. So people sometimes think, they look at if something's confusing, they think maybe there's something wrong with the pointing that we currently have. That's not what's going on here, okay? What's going on here is as part of them putting the vowels, what they also do, what the Masoretes also did was they put accents. And a lot of people don't realize this, but the entire Hebrew Bible actually has pointings, has accents for how to sing. The entire text is supposed to be sung because they sing it in the synagogue. So when you see the priest pointing the altar missile before he does sung mass, so he knows when to do conclusions. Okay, here's a question mark, he puts a thing. Here's the periods, I put a full stop. Every priest has their own way of like marking what's coming up, so he knows how to sing it. Their Bible actually, like, they just did that to the entire Bible. Because they would sing it. On top of this, so these are both what we call traditions. This is tradition of how it's singing. This is tradition of how it's spoken. They would then put also, this is what's called the ketiv and the kere. And the ketiv is what is written, and the kere is what is spoken, or what is read. So they would actually put notes, and this is bizarre to me, and I can't quite figure this out. They would put notes on, okay, the text is tradition. We're not changing it. But when you read this out loud, this is what you say, and it's not actually what's written. Okay? It's really kind of a bizarre notion to us. When I told this to Father Curtis, he goes, is this what Justin Barter was talking about when he said that the Jews changed their scriptures? Like, I mean, I guess in a certain sense they are saying something different than what's written. So when I opened up my Hebrew Bible, actually there was like a footnote here, and I went down to the footnote and it said K, and it told me the line, and it said Q, and so it changed the word in it. So when you read it, you read something different, but when you're reading it to yourself, you read something else. It's a really kind of a bizarre thing, but so you have kind of like an oral tradition and a written tradition, or how it's presented to the masses versus how it's read by the cantor himself. This would happen actually with the divine, like Yahweh. We don't know how to say that, but like they never spoke that. So that's what we call a permanent kere. They had a writing that no matter what, when you say Yod He Vav He, you say Adonai. Doesn't matter. You don't. What is written is not what's read. You read out Adonai, Lord, instead of saying the divine name, which is the Tetragrammaton. So they had this tradition of like saying differently than what is spoken. Well, here what it is this. I can't really get into the whole grammar of it, but the word right here that negates hope is changed to a preposition for or something like that, or and yet I will have hope for him, which is then like dynamically like trying to translate it as I will have hope in him, because it's the guy who's going to slay him that he's going to have hope for. So what is read is, though he slay me, I will hope in him. I will trust him. Okay? So this is negated when it's read. Okay? So it's renegated. It's a negation that's renegated. Why they did that, I don't know. Now, what I find fascinating is, so in my Hebrew Bible, which has variant manuscript traditions, if there are any out there, had nothing for this. There's no other manuscripts that actually has it written the way it's supposed to be spoken. Okay? Which means when Jerome translated his Bible from his Hebrew teacher, the Hebrew teacher gave him the spoken tradition. And Jerome wrote what the Hebrews speak instead of what the Hebrew says. Is that interesting? I don't know. There's something crazy going on here. So because it's in the Vulgate as though he slay me, I will trust in him, which is what was in the spoken tradition of the Hebrews. But it's not actually in the actual text. There's no evidence of it being that in the text that we have. So I don't know exactly what to make of it, but this is your famous line. Now, both of those translations, one of the things is that some people think that, well, to the cantor, to the scribe, it seemed like Job crossed the line. So you don't read out what he says here, like, he will slay me, I will have no hope, because basically Job is automatically assuming that God's going to kill him and there's no hope. And so that seems kind of harsh, so he changes it to a much more softer image, which is, okay, no, he will slay me and still I will trust, even though I'm going to lose this court case. Because that's the context of this, is he's going to do his court case. He's I will take my flesh in my teeth, right? Okay, he's been like eating grass, describing how he's complaining. Well, now he's going to vocalize and take God to court to challenge, to find out what he did. And so upon doing this, he thinks he's going to instigate God to chastise him for it. And so he has no hope of living through this court case that he's about to start. So that's how it's kind of written. How it's received is also, though, like, though I will trust him, because he keeps saying, like with the next line, this will be my salvation, that a godless man shall not come before him. Though my punishment for taking God to trial may be worthy of my death, I will still trust in him, because I know that he knows that I'm righteous, and so I will survive it. Okay? So what's spoken is quite different. Either way, Job is confirmed of his own innocence, which is why he's going to trial. So that meaning doesn't change. But whether or not he has no hope of life is what kind of shifts. Does he have hope of still being in God's favor or not after the trial? I kind of like the fact that this is really hidden, and this dual way of reading it is hidden, because the whole book is very mysterious on its own, which I should have proven by now. And so, anyway, it gets complicated. So now, let's go to where we left off. Which was the third cycle. I left off, we finished chapter 26. I'm going to, one of the things that, I'm not going to do this, but I'm just going to say that a lot of people, I didn't mention this, that a lot of people start to rewrite some of these later chapters because Zophar is missing, even though St. Thomas says it's because Job perfectly answered his question in the last monologue, so he's just silent now. But a lot of people think, okay, the missing Zophar and the truncated Bildad, they kind of think that maybe that was kind of broken up weird. And there's going to be some peculiarities in the next chapter. But I wanted to point this out, because this is one of the ways that people divide this, and I don't actually recommend us doing this, because this is the received tradition. But it still points out, I think, certain interior harmonies between the text, but between the different monologues. But when Bildad says he makes peace in his high heavens, is there any number to his armies? It seems like Bildad is referring to the act of God establishing peace in heaven, okay, with his armies, his cohort of angels, if you will. Okay, that's, I think, how Christians would immediately, I think of like the book of the Apocalypse and St. Michael and the third of the stars of the sky falling, okay? But if we have Canaanite mythology in our head, we kind of think of the creation account of Marduk or Baal attacking the sea demon and the people who had allied with him. Now that is definitely what chapter 26 is dealing with. So what some people do is they actually will consider verse 5 to 14 as actually part of Bildad. Okay, you'll find some Bibles that actually will do that. Like that, they'll displace verse 5 to 14. They'll stick it right here. Since Bildad seems to be talking about the war, well then he describes the war right here. Either way, the text that was received is that Bildad mentions the war and Job explicates it. And again, the tenor of this is all about who knows the divine power. And look, he did all these things, we don't know anything. We haven't heard Job really, I guess he did it a little bit with nature. And he did it in his second monologue where he talks about how God shuts up the Pleiades and the Orion and the bear, and he trampled on the sea. So it's believable that it's Job to me. I don't see it's too out of character. But anyway, I wanted to make that connection. The war is here, and then this is like the the war, if we read our mythology correctly, it's going to be the war of order versus chaos. Which is, I think, lends a lot to this story, because this whole story is really chaos and trying to see the order in it. And to tell you the truth, the fathers of the church, when they allegorize like fleeing serpent and Rahab and like the sea monster, they of course will see the devil in it. And their allegory is actually not too far from the literal sense of the term, if you will. So now we have what I termed is Job's conclusion, okay? So this is our fifth section. The thing is with this fifth section, our problems with our text become kind of, because we're expecting, you're kind of expecting a Zophar, but Zophar disappears, but you're also expecting Job to have replied to Zophar if he does. But what you have here is you actually have a new introduction. All the monologues start the same way, except this one. Now this one starts with, and Job again took up his discourse, okay? That's a unique introduction to a reply monologue, okay? It's always been, and X said this. And this one it says, and Job again took up his discourse. So our editor of our book wanted to know, okay, Job just finished a monologue replying to Bildad, and now he's just saying this other thing. And when we read this, there's going to be some peculiarities in it, which make it really kind of hard to read. At least I found it hard to read. Now, at the beginning, verse 2. As God lives, who has taken away my right, and the Almighty who has made my soul bitter. So Job directly invokes God, and he makes it unequivocal who he's talking to. He's not saying he's not using a you, it's like Elohim, God. As God lives, who, and he attributes God as the agent of all of the misery he's lived through. Okay, this is a very explicitness that we really haven't seen in his monologues. As God lives, who has taken away my right, and the Almighty, El Shaddai, who has made my soul bitter. As long as my breath is in me, and the Spirit of God is in my nostrils. Spirit of God, that's the Ruach word, okay? That's the Spirit of God that hovers over the waters at the beginning of Genesis. It's the same word there in Hebrew. The Spirit of God in his nostrils, which is what he's actually breathing out of his mouth as he describes his state. My lips will not speak falsehood, and my tongue will not utter deceit. So this is Job's plea. He's basically taking a vow that he will speak the truth. Okay? He invokes his lips, not speaking falsehood. Tongue, not utter deceit. Okay? Parallelism. Now, I think we probably should recall that Job has maintained that he's speaking the truth. He did that in the previous, in chapter 24, verse 25. He also did in 21:34. He's been saying he doesn't speak falsehood, or he tells the buddies, hey, prove that I'm wrong, and they can't really do it. So he's convinced, that's for sure, at the beginning of this section, he's convinced that he's speaking the truth, and actually he's vowing to the God who's actually causing his misery that he's speaking the truth. So he acknowledges him still as the deity, even though he's being kind of afflicted by him. Now, we should also remember that the friends have accused Job of falsity and deceit, specifically Zophar. So Zophar is the one that's missing. Maybe Job cuts him off before Zophar can even talk. Because last time Zophar talked in chapter 20, verse 12 to 16, is where he gave the big, that there's sweetness on your tongue, and you hold it in there, and there's serpents in your belly. He used imagery of the lion serpent, like actually dwelling inside Job in chapter 20. Yeah, chapter 20, verse 12, and it goes all the way to verse 16. This is what he said. He goes, wickedness is sweet in his mouth, and he hides it under his tongue. He is loath to let it go, and he holds it in his mouth. His food is churned in his stomach. It is the gall of asps, of snakes within him. He swallows down riches and vomits them up again. He casts them out of his belly. He will suck the poison of asps, and the tongue of a viper will kill him. So he will die from the mechanisms that he himself does. The lying tongue, the tongue of the viper. So Zophar, I think, might be in the background of this. Maybe Job is just hitting him before he can hit him. Again, I think Zophar also, no, Eliphaz also accused Job of being a liar in chapter 15 and in chapter 5. At least he used the conceit and the wiliness in his heart. Far be it from me to say you are right. Till I die, I will not put away my integrity from me. My integrity. That actually is hearkening all the way back to the prologue, chapter 2, verse 3 and 9. Okay? In both those situations, in chapter 2, wrong pen, sorry. In chapter 2, verse 3 and verse 9, in verse 3, God says he has maintained his integrity, and in verse 9, his wife actually says, and yet you still maintain your integrity? Curse God and die. Okay? So here at the end of his monologues, he's like going down to the bitter end and go, till I die, I will not put away my integrity from me, his righteousness, his justification. He has done no wrong. And he's swearing on the God who's going to kill him that, go ahead and kill me. When I die, I will go with my integrity. I hold fast to my righteousness and will not let it go. My heart does not reproach me for any of my days. I don't feel the sting of conscience for anything. I have done no wrong. Okay, I'm going to just put this. God, wife. Except the wife is in the negative. She goes, let my enemy be as the wicked. So this is where people start to see like something peculiar going on, because this doesn't sound like Job, at least the Job that we know, coming up here pretty soon. Let my enemy be as the wicked, and let him that rises up against me be as the unrighteous. For what is the hope of the godless when God cuts him off? When God takes away his life? Well, that's an interesting juxtaposition, considering that like he does actually think God will kill him, but he thinks he's righteous, and he thinks there's a hope for a righteous man who dies. But there's no hope for an unrighteous man who dies. Why is there hope for a righteous man who dies? He's already said it, because he knows with his flesh he will see his Redeemer. And I know that my advocate lives. Right? Will God hear his cry when trouble comes? Will he take delight in the Almighty? Will he call upon God at all times? The wicked man's not going to do this. God, first of all, won't hear the wicked, and the wicked won't even call on God. Okay? So it's not just because God closes his ears. Okay? It's not just a God. Will God hear his cry when trouble comes upon him? Probably not. But why not? Will he call upon God at all times, good and bad? Probably not, because he's unrighteous. Makes me think of when Gregory the Great said, forget mercy. God forgets his mercy. God forgets his mercy when the sinner forgets his justice. I will teach you concerning the hand of God. Remember, Job has said the hand of God has touched me previously. I will teach you concerning the hand of God. But the tenor of this actually does sound kind of like maybe he's actually starting to take the friends' monologues and now make them his own, because he does seem to be using words like Eliphaz and Bildad. I think it was Bildad who said, like, I will tell you what God would say, and then Bildad says what he thinks God says. Like, the friends have always spoken for God in a lot of ways, of understanding God's justice and providence and all that stuff. And Job has always said, you know nothing. Like, what are you actually trying to fix? You don't even know that. So why are you telling me what God knows if you don't know me? That's a short of Job's argument, I think. Well, here now, Job is actually going to explain what's in the mind of God. We haven't heard this from Job before, really. Behold, all of you have seen it yourselves. Why then have you all become altogether vain? This is the portion of the wicked man with God. Now, the problem with this is going to sound like almost the complete opposite of what he said in chapter 24. In chapter 24, he describes all of these wicked people whose lamps don't get shut out, who don't die. They die in their prosperity. Their kids are playing with harps and having a good time all their days, and they have material sustenance. On top of that, they steal the food from the poor and the clothes. They steal the children from the widows. Do you remember all that? That's chapter 24. Like, he describes a scenario where God is ambivalent to wicked men, and the wicked men are doing things so wicked that they even murder in daylight. They rebel against the light. They're murdered in the daylight. They become thieves at night. The adulteress hides at night. He goes through all these things, and there's no divine punishment. That was Job in chapter 24. Well, here, he's going to use some examples, and it's going to be the opposite. He goes, this is the portion of the wicked man with God, and the inheritance which oppressors receive from the Almighty. If his children are multiplied, it is for the sword, and his offspring have not enough to eat. Okay, so warfare and famine is what's destined to his children. Those who survive him, the pestilence buries, and their widows make no lamentation. Just so you know, this obscured something right here. This there doesn't exist either in the Hebrew. This is the RSV people trying to disguise the fact that this signals polygamy. This verse, okay? It's a singular man and he has multiple widows. I guess that could be consecutive widows, but it just seems that he has a bunch of wives, and they don't cry when he's gone because he's a worthless husband. That's kind of the air of it. Yet another instance in Scripture where a polygamist is actually described as a bad person. Just throwing it out there. Okay? Didn't know that one existed, but it's right there. Though he heap up silver like dust and pile up clothing like clay, he may pile it up, but the just will wear it, and the innocent will divide the silver. Okay, so he describes that, yeah, they might get riches, but it's all going to go away by the righteous are going to inherit it all. I think you should probably there's a poetical play actually on Eliphaz's gold conclusion of chapter 22 right here, where he told him to actually put his gold into the dust and make the wisdom of God your silver, and you will be redeemed. Job kind of borrows the image and plays with it. The house which he builds is like a spider's web, like a booth which a watchman makes. He goes to bed rich, but will do so no more. He opens his eyes, and his wealth is gone. Terrors overtake him like a flood. In the night, a whirlwind carries him off. Yes, I think they're talking during the night right now, actually, too. Okay. The east wind lifts him up, and he is gone. They've been evoking this east wind a number of times. East wind, it's a cultural thing. It was used in 15:2 and 1:9 actually. So 15:2, that's when he described as hot air as the east wind. But also 1:9, it's actually the wind that kills his kids. The house falls down on them because of this great wind that comes over. So it would be wrong to think of this as not integral to whoever put this here knew what he was doing, because we're in the conclusion. He's going all the way back to the beginning in some ways. It sweeps him out of his place. It hurls him without pity. He flees from its power in headlong flight. It claps its hands at him and hisses at him from his place. I like this. This all describes this tumultuous wind that blows the wicked man off the land, okay? Just like chaff off the threshing floor. That's what Christ uses that a lot. This triple invocation, this is a very common thing. So we have terror. Something not right is going on with this thing. We have terrors. Whirlwind and east wind. We have terrors, whirlwind, and east wind. Okay, like a triple invocation of a thing that's destroying the person. That's actually a common thing. It's used, Jeremiah uses it, Ezekiel uses it. Sometimes they use it with 4. In the prophets, they'll say something like, by sword, famine, and pestilence. Or Ezekiel will say, by sword, famine, pestilence, and beasts. Like this, like threefold destruction coming towards you, or fourfold destruction coming towards you. Job is using a convention here, even though he's doing it with this wind imagery. That's also in the book of the Apocalypse, too. It's the 4 horsemen, which are famine, pestilence, death, and economic ruin. Read, warfare is one of them, the red horse. So that's a convention. It's very often. The claps and hisses, those are common signs that even we use in our culture to show your displeasure, huh? When your kid does something wrong, you go, tss, 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 tss. Huh? Or you're like, hey, get out of here. That's what I do, like the kids when they get in my backyard. I go, hey, get out of here. Tss, 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 tss. Okay? So it uses a physical, something that even we would physically do to show our displeasure, trying to shoo somebody away. And you know what? If you do hear like wind howling or blowing through trees and stuff, like it does, you'll hear banging and clapping and clanging, and sometimes you will even hear it hissing. So it uses a human convention, which is well suited to the natural symbol too. Okay, so it's a very, you got to use your imagination, but it's like right there. Now, we're all together here. Okay, we're all together here. Chapter 28 completely changes its tenor, okay? Like we just finished this whole like driving the wicked man off with this threefold destructive wind, clapping and hissing, and now all of a sudden we're going to get into this very somber, it's a very awesome poem on wisdom. The new RSV actually will title chapter 28 as an interlude. They actually they make an editorial decision and they just write interlude here. A lot of contemporary people who like, a lot of translators of the book, they say that like there's different kinds of language being employed. Its style is kind of different, so a lot of people think maybe the same poet wrote this poem but put it in to this work. Some people think a later person put it into this work. It just doesn't seem to be, it's not a natural flow. So it does signal out. I think it could actually be like an angelic voice singing this, because it's all going to be about where wisdom is, okay? Which no one's actually talked about yet. Everyone's all talking about why suffering happens, and that they're wise and the other person's not. Now this poem comes out of left field and it's going to sing a song about wisdom. And it's going to be really beautiful. And a lot of people think this is like this interlude because look at how the next chapter starts. And again, Job took up his discourse. So you have, if it's Job speaking all the way through, how come you have the introduction again? So what's going on there? I don't have a solid answer for that. But you should mark that in a certain sense. So this unique, and again, Job took up his discourse, seems to be a narrative break. And so what's chapter 28? I think it is probably useful to see it as this kind of like interlude. When I read it, I kind of think like Job just like hissed his buddies away with his wind, and then as he's catching his breath, because he probably blew on them, there's like a chorus of singing going on above, and it's singing about wisdom. If I was going to dramatize this play, this is what I would do probably. Okay? I'd have a voice from an unknown source singing this poem. So let's look at what it is. Surely there is a mine for silver and a place for gold which they refine. Iron is taken out of the earth and copper is smelted from the ore. Men put an end to darkness and search out to the farthest bound. The ore in gloom and deep darkness, they open shafts in a valley away from where men live. They are forgotten by travelers. They hang afar from men. They swing back and forth. As for the earth, out of it comes bread, but underneath it is turned up as by fire. Its stones are the place of sapphires, and it has dust of gold. That's the introductory part of this poem. It's all using, it's creating a whole metaphor out of man's mining activity. And this person is very intimate with ancient mining practices, and he uses it for the bases. of his allegory. And this is actually the only part in the Old Testament that describes ancient mining practices, at least. And that's another thing too. They debate who is it that's doing the mining, because this men here is completely supplied. No one defines any of the pronouns here. The New Revised Standard Version actually will put miners, put an end to darkness. They put a subject. They invent a subject because there is no subject. Which is why some people debate: is this God? I mean, because it seems to be like this guy brings dark things to light, and he does all this. I think it is human activity that the image is built on. I think men is probably the correct one, but it's hidden on who's doing the mining. Okay. But you have somebody who is commenting in a very kind of interesting, beautiful way, if we think about it, on what exactly we've been trying to do in the book of Job. We've been trying to figure out divine wisdom. And yeah, just like this person wrote on the board, it says, into the dark. We've been trying to look for wisdom, and we've been going into a very dark, dark place. And we're trying to figure out what are we going to pull out of it. Where's the wisdom? What's the light? Well, what do men do when they mine? They mine into deep, dark crevices. Where do they go? They go to places that no bird of prey knows, nor falcon eyes of sea. Why? Because it's underground. Okay, deep shafts. The proud beasts have not trodden it. The lion has not passed over it. They go to only where men can go. Why? Because they're making their own way into the dark. To get what? To get treasure. And where do they take that treasure? Well, it's no good to you in the mine. You're going to go back out. And then you're going to go to the marketplace, sell your gold. Okay? Or your sapphires. So it is a beautiful description, actually, of what we ourselves are trying to do in the book of Job. Especially if we think about how much of it has been just sitting in the dark. Job himself has described his entire existence as one dark and hemmed in. He goes forward, doesn't know where to go. He goes backward, and he's not there. He goes left, right. He has no path. His light is as if it's dark. Okay? It's been a serious, constant thing. We're in the mine shaft. Where's the gold, Job? Bring it back out to light. That's what I would say. It does a beautiful, it actually knows of open shaft valleys. This is like what we would call strip mining. Okay, hey, you can mine stuff that's on the surface and then dig a big pit, open shaft. They hang from afar and they swing back and forth. This is horizontal shaft mining. They're inside tunnels on swings, picking on walls. This guy, knows his mining techniques. Okay, hey, men mine for gold. How do they do it? They do it from the surface. They dig tunnels, and they have to hang on ropes and caves, picking up the wall. Deep shaft mining, okay? Up on top, you have, corn growing, okay? But there's a shaft going down that mine shaft, and deep down, you have men down there, okay? The places where nobody else can go, but man can go. Man puts his hand to the flinty rock and overturns mountains by the roots. He's down underneath the mountains. He's describing using the tool of breaking the rock, trying to get the gold. Hey, that takes effort. My grandfather worked he was a kid, but he worked in Centralia, Illinois. And his dad was a coal miner. All the Italians are these coal miners. Miserable. You guys, that job was terrible going in there. That takes a lot of effort. It's probably not as terrible as Job's life has so far been, at least as far as an immediate catastrophe. Okay? He cuts out channels in the rocks, and his eye sees very precious things. So it cuts out channels in the rocks, so it's describing him mining, okay? And the flinty rock, overturning mountains. He binds up streams so they do not trickle. So damming activity. Very damming. Maybe it's also made to sift the gold or do all kinds of things. Archimedes screw. Probably not. This is probably much older than that. But And the thing that is hidden, he brings forth to the light. Are you going to bring it forth to the light? I don't know. Men do all this for a piece of inanimate ore. How much more valuable is the wisdom of God? And how much effort have you tried to get it? That's the allegory right there. I think we can actually schematize this if I wanted to. That's what I'm going to do. This whole thing is really, I should have done this. This whole thing is the mining allegory. It pretty much goes all the way down here. Okay? This is all built on a mining allegory. Verse 2 to 11. Then we can actually break this up, and it's actually, I think, kind of, there's a parallelism to it. You can go from verse 2 to 4, you have the remoteness of the search. Okay? Search out to the farthest bound, places forgotten by travelers. And then from verse 5 and 6, you have the discovery at the end of that remote search. 7 and 8 is the opposite of discovery. You have the ignorance of others. No bird knows it, nor beasts. Falcons, I haven't seen it. So you have lack of knowledge here. Okay? Men are making discoveries. These other things aren't. Are you a brute beast? Even though you soar like a bird? I know some of you can sing like birds, but I don't know. Okay. And then 9 through 11, you have acquired. How do you spell that? Yeah. Wait, what? Yeah. Something like that? Whatever. No. Man, I have a hard job, guys. Okay. So the remote search, you have the remote search up here, you have the acquired knowledge down here, you have discovery, you have people understanding, finding the stuff, and you have the people not being able to find the stuff. You have like this kind of progression and retreatment on this front half. Then you have verse 12. It's a beautiful question. And where shall wisdom be found? And where is the place of understanding? You want to clearly mark that off, okay? Because this is a framing verse. We can actually put an A or something next to it. That's what you want to do. Because it's going to be kind of repeated right over here. Verse 20. From where does wisdom come? Where is the place of understanding? Okay, so whoever wrote this, we haven't, so this chapter definitely has divisions that are easy to see, okay? I would say there's an important distinction to be made here. There's one alteration. The verb has changed. Come to found, okay? That's the change in those two. You always look for the changes. Where shall wisdom be found? Where does it come from? Okay, so where do you go to search for it? And where will you receive it from? Okay, so let's go look at the first question. Where shall it be found? He's going to give us 3 agents. Man does not know the way to it. Period. You can't get it from man. Man does not know the way to it. I think the man word is ish there. It's going to end with Adam over here. And it is not found in the land of the living. Okay? Don't look for it with man. Sorry, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar. The deep says, it is not me. And the sea says, it is not me. So you have a personification of the deep and the sea. Okay? Now the deep, that's tehom. That's the abyss. That's the word for the abyss, like found at the beginning of Genesis. And darkness was on the face of the deep. That word right there, tehom. The sea is yam, which already in the whole book of Job has been used as this adversarial thing. Yam is actually the Canaanite god that Baal fights against. Okay? That's where the Hebrews actually got the word for sea for the Canaanite word for sea god. Just like they got the word for death from the Canaanite god of death, Mot. Okay, so Yam. So these terrifying forces that we've already encountered throughout all the monologues both don't have wisdom. The deep, the Tehom, not with me. Yam, not with me. It cannot be gotten for gold. So here we have a break. So we have 2 verses. It tells us where you cannot find it from. Now it's going to tell you its value. Well, can you purchase it? It cannot be gotten from gold. And silver cannot be weighed as its price. It cannot be valued in the gold of Ophir, in precious onyx, or in sapphire. It uses 4 different words for gold in like 2 verses here. It's kind of an impressive thing. Gold and glass cannot equal it, nor can it be exchanged for jewels of fine gold. No mention shall be made of coral or of crystal. The price of wisdom is above pearls. The topaz of Ethiopia cannot compare with it, nor can it be valued in pure gold. Okay? Of course, definitely playing on the image over there of people mining for gold. They're searching into the darkness as an allegory for actually how one finds wisdom, in the darkness of their ignorance. But the gold that they're willing to go get, like that gold actually can't even purchase wisdom. How much are you trying to find wisdom? From where does wisdom come? And where is the place of understanding? Okay, so where does it come from? It is hidden from the eyes of all the living. So it kind of goes back to... Is that my phone? No? It kind of goes back to repeating it did 3 sources where you can't where you couldn't find it. It's kind of using it again. It is hidden from the eyes of all the living and concealed from the birds of the air. But it uses the birds of the air. This is an addition, which is an interesting, I think, kind of addition. Birds of the air is I don't know. I'm tempted to ponder those 2 things. Abaddon and death say, we have heard a rumor of it with our ears. Okay, so instead of the Tehom and the Yam, he's giving us 2 alternate readings here. Abaddon and death. Abaddon is going to be used in John's Apocalypse for like a name for the Antichrist. But it means like the destroyer, destruction and death. The RSV considers it a proper name, and so that's why it's capitalized. Death, I already said, Hebrew word Mot is the Canaanite god for the dead. So it does seem like there's a parallelism, at least, with these destructive forces here, the Tehom and Yam, Abaddon and Mot. We have heard a rumor of it with our ears, but even these big, great things have just heard a rumor. They've never actually even directly heard it themselves. And then really quickly, you have God understands the way of it. And he knows its place. And he looks to the ends of the earth and sees everything under the heavens. So you have God knows. And this is 2 independent pronouns. It's been implied everywhere else. Now you have like a double independent pronoun, like he's the one that knows. He looks. So it's definitely an emphasis going on when it shifts to God being the source. And he sees everything under the heavens. When he gave the wind its weight and meted out the waters by measure, when he made a decree for the rain and a way for the lightning of the thunder, then he saw it and declared it. He established it and searched it out. It gives us 4 verbs here. God saw it, he declared it, he established it, searched it out. It's probably God saw wisdom, he declared what it is, he fixed it as his governing principle, and he searched it out, meaning all the extension of its, all of its propositions to all the different types of activity man can, and the natural order can encounter, I think is the image of that. And he said to man, and God said to man, and that's Adam, that's the word for man there. Behold, the fear of the Lord, that is wisdom, and to depart from evil is understanding. Now, this is one of the reasons why I kind of actually like the angelic voice thing. They capitalize this because it's clear that the person is talking about God. The word here is Adonai, okay? So it's the convention for the tetragrammaton seems to be in existence when this person wrote this poem. And he definitely, instead of using the tetragrammaton, he uses Adonai. Why he doesn't use the tetragrammaton, I'm not sure. It could be because we're not in Israel. But it's definitely Adonai, the Lord. And God has not been called that in the entirety of the book of Job, and he won't actually be called that anywhere else. It's always Elohim or El Shaddai, all these really old, archaic titles for God. Okay? The Israelite name for God, Adonai, which just means sir, master. Okay? It's only that the Israelites using it to cover the tetragrammaton, which it becomes the proper name for God. It's the Lord. That's why it's capitalized here. So it's definitely using it as if it's the divine name, but whoa, where's the divine name coming from here? That is wisdom. And to depart from evil is an understanding. This verse right here at the end of this poem, it functions as an inclusio. It's like the very first verse of the book. Okay, it's a frame device. With chapter 1, verse 1. There was a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job, and that man was blameless and upright, one who feared God and turned away from evil. You don't have to wait for the prologue to find out that hey, Job is on the right path. Okay? So this is definitely playing off of the prologue. So wherever this came from, it was definitely after the prologue part, I would say. You know, it's the idea that Adonai is here is interesting, which is why I kind of like the idea that it's angelic voices singing this song. And then upon it being quiet, and everyone caught their breath, again, Job takes up his discourse and says, I'll have to do this later, though, because I already went for an hour. So this is what most people consider Job's complete conclusion. And I would say that at least you should probably read it before we discuss it. And if you want, I would say one of a good lens for reading this is chapter 29 are the happy days of yesteryear. Okay, the happy past. And chapter 30 is like the miserable present. Okay? Yeah, present misery and the happy past. And it's pretty self-evident. His conclusion seems to be very easy to interpret. So please read that ahead, and then maybe you can catch stuff that I myself won't catch. Let's pray. In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. Glory be to the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Benedictio Deum tentis, in Patris et Filii Spiritus Sanctus, et super vos et manis semper. Amen.